My name is Nadja Andersson. The date of the recording is the 11th of March 2025, and this is recorded in Glasgow in Scotland. Hi, my name is Nadja. I'm a visual storyteller, and I work mainly in the realms of illustration and comics at the moment. I have a background in fine arts first, Bachelor of Fine Arts, and then in communication design, which means that I have basics of graphic design, photography and illustration, but I am specialized in illustration, and I was also working with illustrating before I got my master's, and continued working with that, and at the moment also working with comics. I am a Swedish-speaking Finn, which means that my mother tongue is Swedish. I also speak Finnish. I'm now based in Glasgow. Obviously, I speak English, and I speak quite a few languages quite poorly. And I think this has to do with my background and also my interests, and actually also is visible in how I create art, I think. This we'll get back to that, but kind of how I approach different subjects with a general curiosity. But if I go back to my childhood, I grew up in Helsinki in Finland as a Swedish-speaking person. Finland has two official languages, Finnish and Swedish, and the Swedish speakers are a minority, and we have quite a strong sort of connection to each other, all of us, because we are quite few. So it's jokingly called being in the duck pond, because we are kind of like ducks swimming around. This is especially evident in the culture world. So all culture creators kind of know each other to some extent. I grew up in a family of culture creators, not in my immediate family, but my grandmother used to be an artist. She's retired now, but she's a very creative person still. My grandfather used to be an artist too, and a poet and a musician. And my parents are not immediately working with culture. Actually, my mom is a journalist and my dad is a teacher. But there were always a lot of discussions about culture and society, history, sort of philosophy. We talked a lot in my family, and this definitely has had an impact on how I got interested in creating art. And I think someone else who was really influential was my mother, and she is still, but because she had been a very creative child, but she grew up in a lower income household, and she'd never felt that she could actually achieve that dream of hers, so like give it a go. And that was something she really wanted for me and my siblings, was for us to actually get that proper chance to achieve what we were dreaming of. And for me, that was art or creativity in some sense. Ever since I was little, I loved telling stories, writing stories, and drawing. And actually, that is something that I recently also started lecturing about, sort of how to use inspiration and how to get to use pictures to inspire texts and stories, and then vice versa, how to use texts to inspire pictures. This also has also become the way, or I developed in a way of like actually seeing the world, viewing the world. Maybe that was also to some extent genetic for me. I have been told that when I was a baby, my favorite thing to do, I was a very lazy baby, and I loved it just sitting down. But my favorite thing to do was having one box that was full of toys and items, and one box that was empty. And taking one toy at a time from the box that was full, viewing them, tasting them, just like looking at them from all angles and then placing them in the empty box. And when that box was full and the other box was empty, I would start all over again. And I could sit for hours, apparently. In a way, I guess I just continued doing that all my life. I have always had a certain curiosity about the world and about people in the world. And that really, I think, has shaped how I approach art and creating. So the way I approach art is usually wider rather than deeper. I've always wanted to learn as many techniques and as many things and ways of creating as possible rather than mastering one. I have had, when I was studying fine art, I had a huge curiosity about alchemy and also about the failure of it. I kind of like failing, experimenting and failing in various different ways. And I've never really seen myself as a master of anything or as a genius. I've seen myself as kind of an everyday human who is just very curious. And I feel so fortunate to, at the moment, be able to work with what I love. By the side of my comics and my illustrations, I also write news articles, and I also write other texts. And writing is something that I have quite low confidence in, but that I every now and again get to do more. I've also written a children's book and a comic short story. Those were published in Finland. Actually, almost all my work is in Finland and in Swedish in Finland. So in that duck pond that sort of I sprouted out of, even though I myself am now based in Glasgow. I have never lived in Finland since I became an adult. I'm going on a tangent here, but yeah, I then moved. I've worked in Norway. I lived in England and studied in England first, and then moved to Glasgow. Then I moved to Greece, and then I was fortunate enough to spend a couple of years. I was receiving art grants and was able to live in artist residencies. So I was in Brazil and Iceland and traveling a lot. But now I've been based in Glasgow since, well, first I was here 2014 to 16, and then now since 2019. I wrote down some of my biggest influences. I would start by saying that my family members are very big influences in my work, and also my grandmother in the way that I was always watching her create. She kind of worked with stories a lot, both with texts and illustrations. She wrote theater plays, she wrote books, children's books, and she illustrated her own books often. And outside of that, some of my biggest influences from Finland, I grew up with, for example, Tove Jansson, the creator of the Moomins. Then when I started studying in the UK, I got to know I'm a sucker for humor, so David Shrigley is a big kind of influence that I fell in love with. And then, for example, surrealists such as Leonora Carrington and Dorothea Tanning have been quite big influences. And there are more, but of like other famous creators, I would say those. I'm also very influenced by other creators I see on social media or meet or have met in like artist residencies and everyday people. I love traveling. I love living and working in different places and just talking to people. Even though I'm an introvert, I just have to always work up the energy to talk to people. And that's also why I like also doing some elements of journalism, because that gives me that push to actually go out and interview people or talk with people. and tell their stories. At the moment, yes, as I've mentioned, I'm focusing on comics and kind of journalism. The world right now, I see it as a very dark place, and I'm trying to get that darkness across, but also kind of the hope of it. And I think that kind of my interest in storytelling comes in handy here, because I think that's what we need. We need this enchantment and hope that even in the darkest moments, through culture and kind of through the magic of it, we will get through. I believe that, and I don't know if that makes sense to anyone else, but yeah. The biggest challenge of it all can be to keep up that hope, I think. And also, being an artist, I always find that challenge of like earning a living versus creating freely. I remember when I was 13, I made a sort of illustrated poetry collection that wasn't published, of course. It was just in my, like, for myself. But I was looking at it recently, and I felt that I've lost something there. I need to try and find back to not having anyone else's expectation discolor what I create from the start. I think that that's the biggest challenge. And then obviously just making any kind of living in a world where everything's getting dearer, and income doesn't reflect that, especially in a lot of cultural work. If I could give my younger self any kind of advice, you see, the thing with me is that I don't think I would listen to my own advice. I would probably say something opposite. I would say like, oh, go into the corporate world or stop doing what you're doing, because then I would still get into the same routes I got into now. My parents always say that it's good to always tell me the opposite of what they want me to do, because yes, I'm very stubborn and tend to do the opposite of what I'm told. I had a question if I've tried any unconventional mediums or techniques, and I have, especially mediums. I have, with my interest that I used to have in alchemy, that came with a lot of experimental, making my own pigments, making my own like binders for colors, anything from using garlic or using honey. I had a phase where I was making really big paintings with charcoal and oil, and this was kind of inspired by the myth of that Joseph Beuys had spun for himself, where he was talking about using felt and fat and sort of the shamanistic sort of materials. Shamanism is another thing that I've had a huge interest in, that and magic and Swedish trolldom. I've also been super curious about voodoo and sort of the basis of all religion. And I'm not religious. I actually have a hard time really believing in anything, but I have this curiosity again, where I want to learn as much as possible about as much as possible. But yes, my unconventional mediums and techniques have stemmed a lot from like stuff I read, and then I want to try it out. I also love using like natural materials, anything I can find in nature. I think as a Finnish person, I've always felt very rooted in nature in a strange way. I have just loved using anything from like ground up bark or soil or parts of fish. I have actually used in one of my children's books fish fin parts from like when I was fishing with my dad, and I wanted to preserve as much as possible from the animals. An unconventional technique I started doing when I was doing my master's actually was my face prints, where I was using charcoal or paint and using my face as making a mark. So kind of like a thumbprint, but a face. And I was doing that in different constellations and in different projects for quite a while. And it's just one example of also using fire. I like kind of the sort of wild element of fire, like implementing that in something, burning a page of a book or something like that. Kind of because you can't control it fully. So it's kind of like nature in that sense. When I work, I wish I could say that I would just have silence, because I used to be able to really enjoy silence. But actually, since, I was traumatized in 2016, 17, and developed PTSD. And even though I've gotten rid of the PTSD now through therapy, I that got me into kind of the bad habit of always having noise or having some sort of sound with me when I'm working, because I couldn't really stand silence as much. And I need to get out of that. I want to work more on that, but at the moment I still often have podcasts or any kind of like talking with me. And I think that that's just something I got used to, and I got sort of worse at dealing with the loneliness that can come in silence, or the thoughts that can spring up in silence. But I think actually in order to get back to a higher level of inspiration, I need to do that. I think these questions I've gotten to answer here give me some things to think about. I think I should change how I'm doing stuff a little bit. The most heartwarming reaction that I've gotten to my work has always been if someone says it's inspirational or it's inspiring them to do something. I remember the first time that really, really, really touched me was a stranger who approached me when I was having an exhibition as part of my bachelor studies. And she approached me about some works I had. The works I had were paintings with short texts that were covered up in white boxes, and you were allowed to open one. So it was kind of like getting a tarot reading or like an animal reading. And she said she was an artist and she had a painter's block for ages, but that she felt inspired by the card or the painting she had gotten to see. And that was really special. And in the same way, whenever someone has approached me with something similar, it always feels really good. What do I hope people take away from my artwork? Well, I want people to feel something. And coming back to the inspiration part, I hope that people feel inspired in some way, even if it is that they get upset with something I deal with. This has happened too, like because I draw comics that are aimed for children and teens, and sometimes the children's parents get upset because they think I've used a slightly too vulgar word or some too vulgar language, or that the theme is maybe not appropriate. But that's also good. I think it's good if something springs discussion, and then we can think about what it is we want to kind of shelter our young kids or teens from, and what's appropriate for what ages. So all discussion is good, all debates are good, and this is the tangent too, but I feel like people can't debate anymore. We are all so absolute in our opinions, and we name call each other really quickly, and I just wish we would all discuss and listen more and actually reflect on our own opinions too, and dare to change our minds or question our own minds or motives. And maybe that's something that I'm trying to do, kind of I don't want to think too highly of like what I can achieve with my work, but if someone can feel something, then that's good. And if you want to see some of my work, I have a website, www.nadjaandersson.com. Nadja is written Nadja, and Andersson is 2 S's O-N. So the kind of Swedish way of writing that name. And for my social handles, I am Nadja Andersson Illustration on Instagram and Facebook, and I actually limit my time on Instagram now, so I am only there on Mondays. If anyone goes there and tries to DM me or something, you will not hear from me until a Monday. But I'm also on Blue Sky, and there I think I am Nadja Andersson Illu. And hope this made sense to someone in some way. I hope you're all well, happy, healthy and inspired. And bye for now from Glasgow.